The crystal walls of the observation station caught the light from distant stars and threw rainbow patterns across the curved floor. 12 different alien beings sat around a floating table that glowed with soft blue light. Each creature looked very different from the others. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of living plants. This was the Galactic Observation Council, and today they were doing something they had done many times before. They were watching a young species to see if that species was ready to join the big family of space-traveling civilizations. The species they watched today was called humanity, and they lived on a small blue planet called Earth. Senior observer Al looked like a tall, thin tree with silver bark. His many eyes could see in different types of light, and right now they were all focused on the data screens floating in front of him. For 50 years, his people had been watching the humans. 50 years of careful study to answer one simple question: were humans safe to be around? "The data looks very good," said Bloom of Seven Suns. She belonged to a plant-like species called the. Her body was made of living flowers that changed color when she spoke. "These humans have stopped fighting big wars. They work together on space projects. They even try to fix their planet's air and water." Al clicked his mandibles together. He looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and compound eyes. "I agree. The humans show no signs of territorial aggression. They share resources. They help each other, very different from their violent past." Around the table, other council members nodded their various heads, tentacles, and sensory organs. The delegate who lived underwater on his home planet spoke through a water-filled helmet. "Their biology shows they were once predators, but they have clearly evolved past that stage. Look at their teeth, so small. Their claws, they have none. Even their bite force is pathetically weak." Al called up holographic images of humans doing everyday things. They watched human children playing together, sharing toys and helping each other up when they fell. They watched human scientists working together in labs, passing tools to each other, and celebrating discoveries as a group. They watched human workers building things together, solving problems by talking them through. "Remarkable transformation," Al said, his branch-like fingers dancing over the control panel. "Their history shows they were once apex predators on their world, but now, look at them. They have become cooperative, peaceful, almost gentle." The council had seen this before with other species. Many young civilizations went through a phase where they stopped fighting and started working together. It usually meant they were ready to meet other space-traveling species without causing trouble. "I motion that we approve them for contact protocols," said Bloom of Seven Suns. Her flowers were now a happy yellow color. "They meet all the requirements for peaceful integration." But Al held up one thin hand. "Not yet. I want to do one more observation session, just to be completely sure. We will watch them during a normal workday, away from their home planet. If they can cooperate and remain peaceful even in the stress of space work, then we know they are truly ready." The other council members agreed. It was always better to be safe when meeting a new species for the first time. Al programmed the observation equipment to focus on a human mining ship near Jupiter's moons. The ship was called the Prometheus Dawn, and it was doing routine work extracting rare metals from the ice of Europa. "Perfect test," said Al, rubbing his front legs together. "Mining work is stressful. If humans can remain cooperative and peaceful during hard work in space, they can handle anything." The council settled back to watch. On the main screen, they could see the human ship floating next to the white and blue surface of Europa. It was not a big ship, maybe 300 feet long, and it looked like it was built for work, not for fighting. There were no weapons visible anywhere on it. The council could see inside the ship too, using their advanced scanning technology. 40 humans moved around inside, doing their jobs. The council watched as humans shared their meals, told jokes to each other, and helped when someone needed assistance with heavy equipment. One human male named was talking to a small screen that showed a little human girl. The council's translation computers told them that today was the girl's birthday and was her father. He sang a song to her and promised to bring her a special rock from Europa when he came home. "Look how gentle he is with the young one," whispered Bloom of Seven Suns. "No aggression, no dominance displays, just pure affection." In another part of the ship, a human female named Doctor worked in a laboratory. She was studying tiny pieces of ice that might contain microscopic life. The council watched as she handled each sample like it was precious, being very careful not to damage anything that might be alive. "Remarkable," said the delegate, bubbles rising in his water helmet. "She shows reverence for life forms so small they cannot even be seen without machines. These humans have truly become peaceful creatures." Al was preparing to write his final report when alarm sounds started coming from the human ship. The humans all stopped what they were doing and looked at their instruments with concern. "What is happening?" asked Al, leaning forward in his chair. The council's computers quickly translated the human alarm messages. Something was approaching their ship, something that was not supposed to be in this part of space. The humans' long-range scanners had detected multiple large objects coming around the far side of Europa. On the main screen, the council watched as Captain Sarah, the leader of the human mining ship, walked quickly to the bridge. Her face was calm, but the council's biological scanners showed that her heart rate was starting to increase. "Unknown contacts approaching from Europa's far side," reported one of her crew members. 12 large vessels. They do not match any known human ship designs." The council looked at each other with growing worry. They knew what this might mean. There were other species in the galaxy that were not as peaceful as the ones sitting around this table. Species that took other beings as slaves or simply destroyed them for fun. Captain's voice was steady as she gave orders to her crew. "Go to Yellow Alert. Send a message to Earth Command. Let them know we have visitors." The council watched the humans react to the approaching danger. They moved quickly, but they did not panic. They helped each other prepare the ship systems. They spoke in calm voices, even though their biological readings showed they were becoming more alert. "They handle stress well," observed Al. "Still no violence, still cooperative. This is very promising." But deep in space, the approaching ships were getting closer, and the council was about to discover that everything they thought they knew about humanity was completely wrong. The Prometheus Dawn hung in space like a metal insect next to Europa's white surface. From their observation station, the council could see every detail of the human mining operation. Giant machines carved into the ice, pulling out chunks that sparkled with rare metals. Human workers moved between the machines, checking readings and making adjustments. Captain Sarah stood on the bridge, watching her crew work. She was a woman of medium height with short black hair and calm brown eyes. The council's scanners showed that her brain activity was focused but relaxed. This was routine work for her and her people. "Mining output is ahead of schedule," reported her first officer, a man named James Park. "The new extraction equipment is working better than expected." Nodded and made notes on her electronic tablet. "Good. Send the updated numbers to Earth Command. They'll want to know the new equipment is worth the cost." In the ship's common area, 12 humans sat around a table eating their midday meal. They shared food from their plates and talked about their families back on Earth. One woman showed pictures of her new baby. Another man talked about the house he was building for his retirement. They laughed at each other's jokes and listened when someone had a problem. "Note the complete absence of hierarchy enforcement," said Al, pointing one of his 4 arms at the screen. "The captain could easily dominate the food distribution, but instead she waits in line like everyone else. No territorial marking, no resource guarding. Very unusual for a species that evolved from predators." Bloom of Seven Suns changed to a pleased purple color. "They have clearly moved beyond their primitive instincts. Look how they share space without any conflict. On my world, even our peaceful species needs defined territories to prevent stress. In the ship's engineering section, worked on repairing a mining laser that had overheated. He was the same man they had seen talking to his daughter earlier. His large hands moved carefully over the delicate electronic components. When a younger crew member came to help, patiently explained what he was doing. "I've been working on these lasers for 8 years, said to the younger man. "The trick is to never force anything. If a component doesn't want to fit, there's usually a reason. Figure out the reason first." The younger man nodded and asked questions. Answered each one without any sign of annoyance, even when the same question was asked twice. "Excellent teaching behavior," observed the delegate. "He shares knowledge freely without expecting anything in return. This indicates a species that values group success over individual advancement." In her laboratory, Doctor continued her careful study of ice samples. She used tools so gently that the council's sensors could barely detect the pressure she applied. When she found what might be a microscopic life form, she called her assistant over to look. "See this cluster here," she said, pointing to something too small for normal eyes to see. "The way these molecules are arranged suggests they might be organized by biological processes." Her assistant, a young man named David, looked through the microscope. "Are you sure? It could just be random crystal formation." Doctor smiled. "That's why we do multiple tests. Science isn't about being sure. It's about being careful and honest about what we don't know yet." She began preparing different tests to study the sample without damaging it. Every movement was slow and deliberate. She treated the tiny possibility of life with the same respect other species might show to a large, intelligent creature. "Incredible," whispered Al. "She shows protective behavior toward organisms she cannot even see properly. Their evolution toward cooperation is more complete than we thought possible." The council continued watching as the humans went about their work. In the cargo bay, workers loaded processed metals into storage containers. They worked in teams of 4, each person knowing exactly what the others would do next. No one gave orders. No one fought over tasks. They moved like parts of a single machine, but a machine that could think and adapt. When one worker injured his hand on a sharp piece of metal, the other 3 immediately stopped what they were doing to help. They cleaned the wound, applied medical treatment, and finished his work for him without being asked. "Group protective behavior," noted Al. "They respond to injury of a group member as if it were injury to themselves. This level of cooperation usually takes thousands of years to evolve." Captain's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Attention all hands. We're getting some interesting readings on long-range sensors. Probably just space junk, but I want everyone to stay alert. Out." The humans continued their work, but the council noticed small changes. People talked a little less. They checked their instruments more often. A few crew members moved to positions closer to the bridge and engineering sections. "Appropriate caution response," said Bloom of Seven Suns, her flowers shifting to a more alert orange color. "They increase awareness without panic, very mature behavior." On the bridge, James Park studied the sensor readings more carefully. "Captain, I'm getting 12 distinct contacts. They're bigger than anything in our database." Looked at the display screen. 12 red dots were moving around Europa's far side, heading in their direction. "How big?" "Each one is about 3 times our size," Park replied. "And Captain, they're showing energy signatures that look like weapons." Was quiet for a moment, thinking. The council watched her brain activity increase, but it was the focused thinking of someone solving a problem, not the chaotic thinking of someone in panic. "Send a standard first contact message," ordered. "Tell them we're peaceful miners and ask about their intentions. Also send a coded message to Earth Command. Let them know we might have found someone new out here." The council felt a chill of worry. They recognized the energy signatures Park was describing. Those were not the ships of any peaceful species. The size and weapons configuration matched reports they had received from other parts of the galaxy, reports of raiders and slavers. "By the seven voids," Al whispered, "those are vessels." The other council members turned to look at him with expressions of horror on their various faces. They were known throughout the galaxy as brutal raiders who took other species as slaves. They had advanced weapons and ships specifically built for fighting. Their culture celebrated violence and conquest. "The humans don't know what's coming toward them," said the delegate, bubbles of distress rising in his helmet. "They're trying to make peaceful contact with monsters." On the screen, they watched as Captain's message went out toward the approaching ships. The humans waited for a response, still working but now with obvious concern. Doctor secured her samples, finished repairing the laser. The cargo workers moved the processed metals to more secure storage. The Council's long-range sensors picked up the response before the humans did. It was not a message of peaceful greeting. It was a demand for immediate surrender, followed by harsh laughter and descriptions of what would happen to the humans if they refused. "They have no chance," Al said quietly. 40 humans against 12 warships. We're about to watch the extinction of a species that was almost ready to join us." The message reached the Prometheus Dawn. Captain listened to the translation with a calm expression that never changed. Around the bridge, her crew waited for orders. Wells said quietly, "That's unfortunate." She touched a button on her command chair. "All hands, this is the captain. We have hostile contact with an unknown species. They're demanding our surrender and threatening to take us as slaves. This is not acceptable." The council watched in growing dread as the human crew received this news. They expected to see panic, desperation, maybe attempts to flee. Instead, they saw something they didn't understand at all. The humans became very calm. Their heart rates slowed down. Their brain activity became focused and sharp. They looked at each other with expressions that were calculating. "Interesting," continued over the ship's communication system. "All departments, please stand by for new instructions. We're going to show our visitors why that was a very poor decision on their part." The 12 ships that came around Europa's edge were nothing like the peaceful human mining vessel. They were black and covered in spikes, built like weapons themselves. Each one was 3 times bigger than the Prometheus Dawn and bristled with gun ports and missile launchers. Red lights pulsed along their hulls like angry heartbeats. The Council recognized them immediately. These were war vessels, designed by a species that had turned violence into an art form. For 300 years, they had terrorized the outer reaches of the galaxy, taking slaves and destroying anyone who opposed them. "This is Warpack Alpha L of the Dominion," came a harsh voice over the communication channels. The translation computers turned the alien words into something the Council could understand, but they could not translate the cruelty in the voice. "Weak flesh creatures in the small vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed." On the main screen, the Council could see the leader in his ship's command center. L was 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like black leather. His teeth were designed for tearing meat, and his eyes showed the intelligence of a natural predator. Behind him, dozens of other prepared weapons and checked targeting systems. "Your soft bodies will bring good prices in the outer markets," L continued, and the Council could hear him laughing. "We will be gentle when we remove your limbs for easier storage." In the observation station, Bloom of 7 Suns changed to a dark blue color of extreme distress. The humans have no idea what they're facing. They will torture them before selling them as slaves. Captain's response came back calm and steady. "Unknown vessels, you are currently in violation of Sol System territorial space. Please state your business here or withdraw immediately." This made the laugh even harder. On their ships, weapons began powering up. Energy signatures that could crack moons in half started building toward firing readiness. Did the little creatures just threaten us? El asked his crew. These weak beings with no claws, no armor, no fangs, they dare to make demands of The council watched in horror as the human mining ship hung helpless between the 12 war vessels. There was nowhere to run. Human ships were built for work, not for fighting. Even if they could escape, the ships were much faster. "We should send a rescue fleet," said Al, his mandibles clicking with distress. "Maybe we can arrive in time to save some survivors." "Our nearest ships are 6 hours away," replied Al sadly. "By then, there will be nothing left to save." But something strange was happening on the human ship. The Council's biological scanners were picking up changes in the crew. Heart rates were increasing, but not with fear. Brain chemistry was shifting in ways the Council had never seen before. Adrenaline flooded human bloodstreams, but instead of causing panic, it seemed to make them more focused. Captain touched another button on her command chair. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Still calm, but with an edge that made the Council's translators work overtime to find equivalent concepts. "All hands, this is the captain. Code Black protocols are now in effect. This is not a drill. All departments switch to emergency procedures immediately." Around the ship, the humans began moving with new purpose. The casual, cooperative behavior the Council had been observing disappeared. In its place came something that looked almost like a military operation, but more coordinated than any military the Council had ever seen. "What are Code Black protocols?" asked the delegate. The Council's computers searched through all their data on human society. They found references to military preparedness, emergency procedures, but nothing that explained what was happening on the Prometheus Dawn. Left his repair work and moved to what looked like a storage closet. When he opened it, the Council saw that it was full of equipment they hadn't noticed before. He began pulling out items and passing them to other crew members. Tools that looked like mining equipment, but arranged in ways that suggested other uses. "Those are weapons," Al said quietly. "Improvised but definitely weapons." Doctor abandoned her laboratory and moved to what the ship's computer labeled as the Auxiliary Control Center. When she arrived, she began calling up displays that showed the positions of the ships. Her gentle hands moved across control panels with surprising speed and confidence. "Navigation, I need intercept courses for all hostile vessels," she called out. Her voice had the same edge as Captain's now. "Tactical, what's our defensive posture?" "Wait," said Bloom of Seven Suns, her flowers turning a confused yellow. "Why is the scientist giving military orders?" Other humans throughout the ship were changing too. Workers who had been sharing jokes and helping each other now moved with deadly precision. They knew exactly where to go and what to do without being told. It was like watching a machine activate, but this machine was made of thinking, adapting parts. On the ships, weapon systems reached full charge. "Enough talk," growled El. "Disable their engines and prepare boarding parties. Remember, we want the soft ones alive for the markets." The first weapon's blast hit the Prometheus Dawn's shields. The human ship shook, but it did not break apart as expected. Instead, the humans seemed to use the impact as a signal. Captain's voice came over the communication system one more time, and now it carried something that made the Council's primitive fear responses activate. "All hands, weapons free. Show them why they should have stayed home." The mining ship began to change. Panels slid away to reveal guns that had been hidden inside the hull. Mining equipment rotated and reconfigured into missile launchers. The cargo bay doors opened, and the Council saw that the processed metals were actually some kind of ammunition. But the most disturbing change was in the humans themselves. The peaceful, cooperative beings the Council had been studying were gone. In their place were creatures that moved like predators, thought like tacticians, and coordinated like a hunting pack. "Impossible," whispered Al. Our psychological profiles showed complete pacification. There were no signs of military capability. Doctor called out coordinates and firing solutions with the same gentle voice she had used to discuss microscopic life. Operated a weapon system with the same careful precision he had used to repair mining equipment. Even the young crew member who had been learning about laser repair was now managing targeting computers with expert skill. The Prometheus Dawn fired back at the vessels. The Council expected to see desperate, ineffective shots from improvised weapons. Instead, they saw coordinated strikes that found weak points in armor with surgical precision. One of the smaller ships exploded in a ball of fire and debris. By the seven voids, Al breathed, they just destroyed a raider with mining equipment. Warpack Alpha L's laughter stopped. On the main screen, the Council could see confusion and then anger on the leader's face. What just happened? L demanded of his crew. How did weak flesh creatures destroy the Razor Wind? His weapons officer, a veteran of 100 raids, checked his instruments twice before answering. Warpack Alpha, the soft ones. They appear to know how to fight. They had expected to find helpless prey. Instead, they had awakened something that their own predatory instincts told them to fear. Captain's voice cut across space like a blade. Vessels, you have 15 seconds to withdraw from this system, or we will continue teaching you about human territorial defense. Your choice. The Council sat in stunned silence, watching peaceful miners transform into something that could make professional killers hesitate. And the battle had only just begun. Warpack Alpha L did not withdraw. The idea of retreating from soft creatures without claws or natural armor was impossible for his warrior mind to accept. Instead, he ordered all ships to attack at once. Kill them all, he roared. No prisoners. Show these weak beings what happens when they challenge the 12 warships opened fire simultaneously. The space around the Prometheus Dawn filled with energy beams and explosive missiles. The Council expected to see the human ship torn apart in seconds. Instead, they witnessed something that would change their understanding of life in the universe forever. The Prometheus Dawn moved like a living thing. Captain somehow predicted where each attack would come from and guided her ship away from the worst damage. When she couldn't avoid an attack, she positioned the ship so that the enemy's own weapons' fire hit asteroids, turning chunks of rock into shields. Impossible navigation, whispered Al. She's using the asteroid field like cover, but she's also using it as a weapon. Indeed, Captain was not just avoiding the asteroids. She was herding the ships into positions where they would hit each other or get trapped between large rocks. Every movement of her ship seemed designed to make the enemy's superior numbers work against them. But it was not just the ship that had changed. It was every human on board. Doctor no longer looked like a gentle scientist. Her kind eyes had become the calculating gaze of a tactical genius. She processed the movements of 12 enemy ships as easily as she had studied microscopic life forms. Her voice remained calm as she called out targeting information, but now that calmness was terrifying instead of comforting. Enemy formation pattern suggests pack hunting behavior, she reported. Recommend we break their coordination by targeting the Alpha ship's communication array. Had transformed from a careful repair technician into something the Council could only describe as a weapons specialist. His large, gentle hands operated the ship's guns with deadly precision. When he fired, ships lost shields, engines, or weapon systems exactly where he aimed. Target the third ship's engine section, Doctor called out. Force them to break formation. Response was a perfect shot that crippled the vessel's propulsion system. The enemy ship spun out of control and crashed into one of its companions. 2 targets disabled, reported in the same patient voice he had used to teach laser repair, moving to secondary targets. Throughout the ship, every human had become something that scared the Council more than the raiders. The young crew member who had been learning about electronics was now operating sensor arrays that could track multiple targets simultaneously. Workers who had been loading cargo were now feeding ammunition to weapons systems with mechanical efficiency. "They're coordinating like a single organism," Bloom of Seven Suns said, her flowers now a pale white of shock. "But they're not connected by any technology we can detect. How are they sharing information so perfectly?" The answer became clear when they tried to board the human ship. 3 enemy vessels managed to get close enough to attach boarding tubes to the Prometheus Dawn's hull. Armored warriors, each 8 feet tall and covered in natural weapons, cut through the human ship's outer doors. The Council watched in horrified fascination as 40 humans faced off against over 100 professional killers. The battle was not even close. The humans didn't fight like separate individuals trying to survive. They fought like parts of a single predatory creature that had been designed by evolution to kill other things. Every human seemed to know exactly where every other human would be and what they would do next. When warriors tried to use their size advantage in the ship's corridors, they found that the humans had somehow turned the narrow spaces into traps. When the aliens tried to use their superior strength in open areas, the humans coordinated attacks that came from impossible angles. Faced off against a champion, a veteran who had killed hundreds of beings in personal combat, the alien was twice size and had 4 arms equipped with natural claws that could cut through steel. The fight lasted 8 seconds. Eustace's own aggression and size against him, when the alien attacked with overwhelming force, was not where the attack landed. Instead, he was positioned to use the enemy's momentum to send him crashing into a bulkhead hard enough to crack the metal. The warrior did not get up again. "Impossible," breathed the delegate. "The human used the alien's advantages as weaknesses. How did he calculate those physics so quickly?" Doctor coordinated the defense of the laboratory section with the same gentle patience she had shown to her samples. When warriors broke in expecting to find a helpless scientist, they found someone who had turned her workspace into a maze of traps and defensive positions. "Please be careful of the equipment," she said politely as she systematically dismantled an entire boarding party. "Some of these instruments are very delicate." The young crew member who had been asking innocent questions about laser repair was now somehow predicting where enemy warriors would move before they moved there. He set up ambushes 3 steps ahead of the assault teams. Most terrifying of all was how the humans helped each other during the fighting. When one human was in danger, the others didn't just help. They coordinated their assistance in ways that turned individual fights into group executions. They shared weapons, space, and tactical information without speaking, as if they could read each other's thoughts. The boarding parties were eliminated in less than 20 minutes. Outside the ship, the space battle continued. Captain had somehow turned 12 attacking warships into a chaotic mess. Enemy vessels collided with asteroids, fired on each other by mistake, and found themselves in positions where they couldn't use their weapons without hitting their own allies. The Prometheus Dawn, meanwhile, seemed to be everywhere at once. Positioned her ship so that when they tried to target her, they had to shoot through their own formation. When they tried to coordinate their attacks, she used the asteroid field to break their line of sight. "Their tactical coordination is beyond anything in our databases," Al said, his many eyes tracking the battle displays. "They're not just fighting, they're hunting." Warpack Alpha L was no longer laughing. Half his fleet was disabled or destroyed. His boarding parties had been slaughtered by creatures that should have been helpless prey. For the first time in his violent life, he was afraid. "Withdraw," he ordered his remaining ships. "All vessels withdraw to safe distance." But Captain was not done with them. "Negative on the withdrawal," her voice cut across space. "You came here to take slaves. Now you get to see what happens to slavers in human space." The Prometheus Dawn began hunting the fleeing vessels one by one, used their panic against them, driving them into traps and ambushes. Doctor calculated their escape routes and recommended intercept courses, and the other humans operated weapons that turned enemy warships into expanding clouds of debris. The Council watched in stunned silence as a mining ship systematically destroyed one of the most feared raiding fleets in the galaxy. When the battle ended, only 3 ships remained intact, and those were dead in space with their crews unconscious from life support failures. Captain's voice came over the communication channels one final time. To any receiving this transmission, you have just learned that humans do not make good slaves. Please update your databases accordingly. Prometheus Dawn out. In the observation station, 12 alien beings sat in absolute silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The gentle, peaceful humans they had been studying for 50 years had just fought off professional raiders like it was a routine maintenance task. And now they were going back to work as if nothing unusual had happened. 6 hours after the battle ended, the Prometheus Dawn drifted peacefully through a field of twisted metal and debris that had once been a raiding fleet. The mining ship looked almost undamaged, with only a few scorch marks on its hull to show that anything unusual had happened. The Galactic Observation Council had not moved from their stations. They sat in stunned silence, watching the humans go about their business as if they had not just accomplished the impossible. Captain stood on the bridge, filling out reports on her electronic tablet. Her heart rate had returned to normal. Her brain activity showed the same calm focus she had displayed while watching routine mining operations. She could have been documenting equipment maintenance instead of the complete destruction of one of the galaxy's most feared predator species. Incident Report 2387.4, dictated to her computer. Encountered hostile alien vessels during mining operations. Vessels identified themselves as and demanded surrender for purposes of slavery. Demands were declined. Hostile intentions confirmed when aliens opened fire. Defensive measures were successful. Mining operations will resume after debris cleanup. In the ship's common area, the same humans who had moved like deadly predators during the battle were now back to sharing meals and telling jokes. Sat at the same table where he had celebrated his daughter's birthday, cleaning his fingernails and discussing sports scores from Earth. "Did you see the game last night?" one crew member asked. "The home team came back from 12 points down in the final quarter." Smiled with the same gentle expression he had worn while teaching laser repair. "That's nothing compared to what we just did to those raiders." The other humans laughed as if he had made a comment about the weather. Doctor had returned to her laboratory and was once again studying ice samples with infinite patience. Her hands moved with the same careful gentleness she had shown before the battle. When she found another possible microscopic life form, she called her assistant over with the same excited tone she had used earlier. "Look at this, David," she said, pointing at something invisible to normal eyes. "I think we might have found actual biological activity." David looked through the microscope with interest. "Are you sure? The readings could be affected by all that weapons fire earlier." "That's why we test everything multiple times," Doctor replied, smiling. "Good science requires patience and respect for the unknown." She began preparing new tests, treating the tiny possibility of life with the same reverence she had shown before she had coordinated the systematic destruction of professional killers. "They turned it off," Al whispered, his mandibles barely moving. "Whatever they became during the battle, they just turned it off." Bloom of Seven Suns had faded to a pale, frightened color. "How is that possible? We saw their brain chemistry change, their coordination patterns, their combat effectiveness. Those changes should be permanent." But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had somehow switched back to their peaceful, cooperative behavior as easily as turning off a light. They showed no signs of post-battle stress, no aggressive tendencies, no territorial marking or dominance displays. They were exactly what they had been before, gentle beings who shared resources and helped each other. Except now the Council knew what they could become when threatened. Al called up the tactical analysis of the battle. The numbers were impossible to believe, but the computer had checked them 17 times. Human combat effectiveness had increased by 847% once their defensive protocols activated. Their reaction times, pattern recognition, and tactical thinking had reached levels that exceeded anything in the Council's databases. "Look at this coordination data," Al said, pointing to a holographic display. "They didn't just fight as individuals. They functioned as a single organism with 40 separate bodies. They shared information, resources, and tactical awareness without any technological assistance." The analysis showed that the humans had turned civilian mining equipment into military-grade weapons in under 30 minutes. They had improvised tactics that would have impressed professional military strategists from the most advanced civilizations. They had coordinated their efforts so perfectly that they never interfered with each other, never wasted effort, never left gaps in their defense. "Most disturbing of all," Al continued, "they seemed to enjoy it. Look at their biochemical readings during combat. No fear responses, no stress hormones. Their brain chemistry showed patterns consistent with satisfaction." The delegate's water helmet bubbled with distress. "They evolved to hunt. All that cooperation we observed, all that gentleness and resource sharing, it wasn't evidence that they had moved beyond predation. It was evidence that they had perfected it." The realization hit the Council like a cold wave. Humans didn't cooperate despite being predators. They cooperated because they were predators. Pack hunters who had learned to work together so well that they could take down prey much larger and more dangerous than themselves. "Their entire society is designed around pack hunting," Bloom of Seven Suns said, her flowers turning a dark blue of deep fear. "The sharing, the teaching, the coordination, it's all predator behavior adapted for intelligent beings." On the screen, they watched Captain complete her reports and send them to Earth Command. The message was simple and matter-of-fact, as if encounters with slavers were a minor inconvenience. "Earth Command, this is Prometheus Dawn. First contact with hostile alien species has been resolved. Species designation, aggressive slavers. Recommend updating defensive protocols for future encounters. Request diplomatic team for processing surviving prisoners. Out." The 3 surviving ships hung dead in space, their crews alive but unconscious. The humans had somehow disabled the ships without killing everyone inside. Even in the middle of a fight for their lives, they had shown restraint and mercy to defeated enemies. "They could have destroyed everything," Al observed. "They had the capability, but they chose to leave survivors. That suggests they still maintain moral limitations even when their predator instincts are active." It was a terrifying thought. Humans were powerful enough to destroy a fleet, but disciplined enough to show mercy when they won. They were predators, but predators with consciences. Al began writing his final report with trembling appendages. Species designation, Homo, classification, apex predator with voluntary restraint protocols, integration recommendation. He paused, looking around the table at his fellow council members. Each face showed the same expression of awe and fear. Integration recommendation, pending extensive reevaluation. But they all knew what the real recommendation would be. Humanity wasn't ready to join galactic civilization because galactic civilization might not survive the encounter. The humans had spent 50 years convincing the galaxy that they were peaceful and cooperative. They were peaceful and cooperative when they chose to be. But underneath that peaceful exterior was something that could destroy professional killers while discussing sports scores and birthday parties. As the Prometheus Dawn began cleaning up debris and preparing to resume mining operations, emergency transmissions started reaching other fleets throughout the galaxy. The messages were fragmentary and panicked, but they all said the same thing. Stay away from the soft bipeds, they are not what they seem. Warpack Alpha L, floating unconscious in his disabled command ship, would eventually wake up to discover that his species had encountered something they had no experience dealing with. Predators who were better at predation than they were, but who chose to mine asteroids instead of conquering galaxies. On Earth, human governments would soon receive Captain's report and begin updating their contact protocols. They would prepare for the day when other species came calling, and they would be ready to show the galaxy the same choice that had been given: peaceful cooperation or a demonstration of why cooperation was the better option. The Galactic Observation Council packed up their equipment and prepared to return home. They had learned everything they needed to know about humanity, and none of it was what they had expected. In his final personal note, Al wrote, "We came to evaluate a species for membership in our community. Instead, we discovered that we may need to apply for membership in theirs." As their observation station jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Sol system behind, the Council carried with them the knowledge that would change galactic civilization forever. Humanity was not a species that had evolved beyond predation. Humanity was a species that had perfected predation so completely that they could choose to be gentle. And that choice, more than their weapons or their tactics, was what made them the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever encountered. The peaceful miners of the Prometheus Dawn continued their work, extracting rare metals from Europa's ice, sharing meals and jokes, helping each other with repairs and celebrating birthdays. But the galaxy would never look at them the same way again.